way for all of those shot to heal and keep safe, etc. Kevin's going to start
Amen.
to teach us before we can rush you.
Okay.
Guys.
Yeah, great. All great. Okay, I have to just add lib here. So people sometimes don't know. We had a discussion at lunch today about what our purpose is. And I mean, it's a very wide topic. It's, and can be interpreted in many ways. And what will help us if we do mitzvahs? If we do the mitzvahs, you create positive energy. And one of the things the guy told us at lunch, I can't give it as exactly as the way he said it, but mitzvahs and good deeds and trying to follow Hashem's commandments is one of our purposes in life. Besides being good people and having derech eretz, so that's like a default. If we have that in place, and it's not about, obviously people have to make a living and try and make parnosa and ends meet, etc. But the main objective in life is to follow those things to get us through life and with tough times as well. Just got to hang in there. And as I always say, easier said than done. But that's, if we follow try to do as many mitzvot as we can and be decent and try to have good and try to do things that Hashem likes, like be decent to people, derech eretz, and kindness, etc. That should stand us in good stead.
Okay. Well said, Kev. Well said.
That came across.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm going to put it on. I'm going to put it on mute now. I'm just going to.
Right.
I'm at Har Herzl, with that famous Har Herzl, Mount Herzl, where they do all the famous place where memory to all the fallen soldiers who die in battle. They buried here, Har Herzl, Mount Herzl.
Okay. Well. All right, guys. Let's let me just tell you where we left off. Just hang on a second. All right. So, guys, we went through a succession of cases. The bottom line is that we wanted to know, with regards to a case where somebody a custodian made 2 false oaths. Could there be a case where, if witnesses came against him in the first oath, that he was liable for kefil, in the second oath where he admitted it afterwards, where he felt guilt? There's such a thing as a kefil and the one for surcharge on 2 separate oaths. And the answer was that can never be incurred over the same money, even in a case where there is a separate oath. So that was conclusion of the first case. Now, as far as the second case is concerned, we thought maybe that's the law with respect to one person, but with respect to 2 people, if they were both custodians and they were in on they were conspiring together, and they said that a thief took the cow that they were meant to look after away from them, and one of the custodians confessed before there were any witnesses because he felt bad, and the other custodian flatly denied it, and witnesses came against him. We said in the first case, can the first custodian pay the one for surcharge, the principal for his amount, as well as the asham offering, if the other one was liable to a kefil? In other words, we're dealing with 2 people. So in other words, you want to say that if it's 2 people, it's not the same as one, and one can pay a kefil and one can pay one for surcharge. Perhaps it says the merciful one put an overall rule that if you're dealing with a single sum of money over which both would be incurred, the merciful one excludes this, meaning it doesn't matter if they're 2 people. You can't have a kefil and a 1/5. So as far as the Gemara is concerned, that issue remained completely unresolved, and the issue was that it had to stand as is. That was where we left off the second case. The third case was with Rav Papa, and we said that it was a case where what happens if you have a similar mode of payment? In other words, the one for surcharge and the asham offering, in addition to the principal, was for atonement. And that is a separate mode of payment to the careful payment where somebody was not interested in teshuvah, but witnesses came against them and basically forced them into paying the double penalty because they were caught out lying. So in that case, we understand maybe it has to do with two different types of payment that are problematic, that both can't occur simultaneously. And therefore, the proposition is what happens if you have two careful payments? In other words, a person swore falsely twice, the one that was lost, the other one that was stolen, or two separate court cases over the same plaintiff, and witnesses come against him. Could you have two careful payments? Or if a person swore falsely and then they felt bad, but they were quite tardy, they didn't end up paying the one for surcharge, and they paid some of the principal, maybe none of it in full. And then the plaintiff had to go against the custodian again in another court and say, well, you owe me, you felt terrible, but you actually haven't taken any action. And again, he swears falsely, then he feels bad, and eventually the court makes him pay. Sheriff of the court attaches assets. Then exactly in that particular case, when there's two confessions, is there the one for surcharge times two? Or as we said, a fifth of a fifth. It's not as if there's 1/5 and 1/5 over the principal. It's a fifth of a fifth plus the principal plus the usher. Can that occur? And we learned quite clearly, yes. Because what was our case in Leviticus chapter 5, verse 24? Because we said for each time he swears falsely in denial of a monetary obligation, he was liable to another one for surcharge of the fifth, even if each oath was in reference to the same principle. So therefore, Rav Papa learns from this, and we all learn from this, that when the Torah excludes the payment of both the 1/5 and the careful, it means to preclude only the imposition of two different types of payment of the same money, but not the imposition of the same type of payment twice. In other words, just like you can learn if there's multiple payments for a fifth due to perjury, then if there are multiple careful payments, you can pay that because the hypotheses upon which the payments are made are based on a principle. The one will be in teshuvah, therefore you can have multiple teshuvahs, and the other one is a penalty for being a perjurer and an unrepentant sinner, at which you can pay multiple careful upon different false oaths when witnesses come against you. So the only thing you can't pay is a careful in 1/5. According to Rav Yaakov, 1/5 surcharge is within the careful payment to allow for the Hashem offering to Hashem once principal and penalty is paid, and then restitution can be made on a teshuvah basis of that particular front. Now that's where we ended last time. Guys, was the Chazorah helpful in a few minutes? I lost my voice. Yeah. Okay.
It was helpful to us, not to you, because you lost your voice.
Yeah, not because of you. So we're on the 108th daf, A3 to be precise in terms of subject matter, just for Kevin's interest, but we're just talking about the principles here. We're learning something else now. And listen carefully, because everything that we're going to do for the session and the next one will be based on this principle. So the law is that if a deposit is stolen from an unpaid custodian who takes the custodian's oath to free himself from liability, and the thief is apprehended, and the thief makes the careful payment to the deposit's owner. Now, in Bava Kamma 33b, it teaches in the Mishnah, however, that if the custodian waives his exemption and pays the owner for his loss, before they found the thief, just because he's got a good conscience and he feels bad, even though it was proved later, as he said, that this was stolen from him, the owner, in gratitude for the payment, conveys to him the rights to the careful payment that may eventually come due if they find the thief. So again, he pays the principal, but if there's a double payment, it goes to the custodian for going over and above the call of duty to make restitution to the original owner. So if the thief is apprehended later, he pays the kefil to the custodian. This case is very clear, Bava Metzia. What we're dealing with in Bava Kamma is a law in a case where the custodian initially chose to take the oath to exempt himself, which he's entitled to do. But then, after having sworn and being exempted from payment, he went beyond the letter of the law and paid the owner for the deposit. So, can you see the difference between the case in Bava Metzia, Kevin, and the case in Bava Kamma? Can Arthur and Gavin see? Give it back to me.
Kevin, I don't know if you can talk now.
Arthur, I haven't asked you a lot lately. You've been at patience, and we've been patient. Now you're a sitting duck or a lying duck. But you're not lying. That's somebody that does a false oath. But you're just lying down. So take a stab at it. What's the difference between Bava Metzia and Bava Kamma?
No idea, I'll be honest. Blank.
All right, Gavin, would you like to take a shot?
I'll be in a bit.
Damon, I can tell you for 1 second, yeah? Before I put him mute. Can I tell you?
Yeah, sure.
Bava Kamma is about damages. Bava Metzia is about lost objects.
Okay, what I'm
Okay.
asking is something a little bit different. I'm asking the Mishnah regarding the custodian who went over and above the call of duty. What's the difference in the case that I just explained in Bava Metzia versus Bava Kamma? Okay. But Kevin, 10 out of 10 for taking a shot at it, because you're right. In the general principle, that absolutely is the case. The one is acquisitions, the other one is damages. That's correct. Now, let me just repeat it again, since you all are tired after Shabbos, and I appreciate your patience. Again, the law is that if a deposit is stolen from an unpaid custodian who takes the custodian's oath to free himself of liability, which he's entitled to do, especially if it was a genuine theft from the unpaid custodian's point of view, he's entitled to free himself. He doesn't have to be obligated. Now, afterwards, the thief is apprehended. The thief makes the kefil payment. Why does he make the kefil payment? Because he's apprehended. He didn't come and admit in and of himself. And he made the kefil payment to the deposit's owner. So this is very clear cut. Is that in Bava Metzia 33b, it talks about a case where the custodian is a very righteous individual. He could exempt himself with the oath, but instead he waives this exemption because he does not want to even use Hashem's name, even though he could get off, doesn't want to use it. And he pays the owner for his loss because he's conscientious, even though it was genuinely stolen from him. Now, at this point, the original owner doesn't know, but he just says thank you because he's at a loss now. And in gratitude for the payment, he conveys to him the legal rights to the kefil payment should eventually there be an actual thief that comes due, or they apprehend the thief. Okay? So if the thief eventually is apprehended, he pays kefil to the custodian. Now, the custodian is rewarded with a double payment instead of just the principal, because he extended himself when he didn't have to, and he could have got out of all the payment by just taking the custodian's oath that it was stolen from him, because remember, this is an unpaid custodian. So this case is clear. He doesn't take an oath. He just pays the money. He's entitled to the kefil because he's bought that right as a method of gratitude from the owner to him. Bava Kamma deals with a different case. It says it's a case where the custodian initially chose to take the oath, but then, after having sworn and been exempted from payment, because obviously the courts adjure him, and he went beyond the letter of the law and paid the owner for the deposit. So in the case of Bava Kamma, he did make the oath, he was exempted, Later, he thought about and decided to go beyond the letter of the law and paid the owner for the deposit. In Bava Kamma, he didn't even trouble the court to take an oath. He just paid the original money to the owner. So we want to know, in this case, if the owner sued the custodian for return of the deposit and he swore that it had been stolen, thereby exempting himself, and then afterwards he paid for it, he didn't have to, and the thief was subsequently identified. To whom is the kefil paid? Now, there could be two opinions. It could mean that it goes to the original owner, or it could go to the custodian. So, a buyer said...
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yeah, of course.
Why would in the Bava Kamma example?
Yeah.
Why would somebody not take the oath? It doesn't make sense, because then, but automatically you're going to automatically think this guy's definitely a thief. So why would he go ahead and pay for something that he's not guilty of? He either has to be guilty, in which case he pays, and then why does he pay the kefir? You said that he's then, I obviously misunderstood you, but it sounds like he's then liable for the kefir too, which he shouldn't be, because he's paying. He's not liable. So I misheard you.
No. So let me just unpack it. It's a great question. And if you ask it, I know that people aren't understanding. So I'm happy when you ask questions. There's no issue. So the custodian, Gavin, if he takes a custodian's oath, we have to believe him. In the event that witnesses come against him, there are two opinions. One opinion says the oath has already exempted him and case closed, especially in the case of him claiming a loss. In the case of theft, there is an opinion he pays, according to Rav Yochanan, according to if he claims it's a loss, that obviously adjures him, and witnesses come afterwards, he's off the hook in Olam Hazeh. Okay? There are other opinions that state that if he takes the oath and witnesses come afterwards, well, guess what? Then he's going to get clapped with a kefil. Do you get what I'm saying? Because he was caught out. There are other opinions, is that, so according to Rav Yochanan, it exempts him certain cases, and in certain other cases he has to pay the kefir, and in one other case he has to pay the principal. But the bottom line is here, is the custodian, when something is stolen from him and the person says, look, I didn't take, you never paid me for the job, but you did trust me. It was stolen, but I understand your anxiousness, and here's the money. I should have looked after it better. I wasn't paid. I don't have to pay it. I can take the oath that it was stolen from me and I can get off the hook. But I tell you what, here's the money. You're not going to think that person's a thief, because the whole reason for stealing is to get away with a profit. If you're a custodian, is to make money. It's not to lose money. Gav?
Yeah, but if you're the owner, you're going to think that maybe this guy doesn't want to be implicated later by witnesses, and he wants to come clean now.
No, but the thing of it is, if
I let you look after my house or somebody else, and they looked at, and let's say my TV disappears, and the guy wants to pay for it, I'm going to think, well, he obviously sold it, and now he feels guilty that he did wrong, and he's going to buy me a new one or give me the money. I would absolutely think he's guilty here.
Okay, and how would you feel if he just absolutely flat out denied it and you knew he took it, or you knew he had everything to gain by taking it? You'd know he was guilty there either. This has nothing to do with what the owner thinks. This has everything to do with his conscience in terms of responsibility and how he feels. Hashem will look at him. There's nothing to do with what the owner thinks. Who cares?
Yeah, but in this case, this guy happens to be innocent. That's why he's doing it. And so he should have taken those.
No, because for him, the value system is, number one, he didn't want to trouble the court. Okay, that's what the Gemara is going to go into. He didn't want to trouble the court. Number two, he doesn't want to use Hashem's name to clear his name. He cares more about using Hashem's name than he does about clearing his name. He doesn't give two hoots what the he cares about doing the right thing for the original owner of the item. Of course, he wants to do the right thing before Hashem, but he doesn't care about the owner's opinion. He's more concerned about using Hashem's name than what the owner thinks of him. And how many of us care more about what people think than what Hashem thinks? And this is exactly why you pay the double payment as a kefil.
For the thief, yeah. For the versus the robber, yeah. Because the robber doesn't distinguish, and people, most people do.
Yeah.
They care about other people. They don't care about Hashem. So no, Shkak. Okay, now you explained it I understood it better the second time. The way you explained it now, I've got it now. Thank you.
Gavin does still have a point. He's going to say, well, listen, maybe the guy was nervous to pay the kefil, and therefore he might be guilty, and he might be guilty and just not want to pay the kefil if he's caught later. So therefore, when the owner says, listen, I'm going to take you to court unless you pay me, he might have thought that he'd now have to pay a double payment, so he might as well return it, and he could be guilty. However, that's still good, Gavin, because he could have got off the hook according to the opinion that said we have to believe the custodian's oath, but he still might have been a thief, decided to do teshuvah and not use Hashem's name in vain, when he could have got off the hook entirely.
100%. He's either elevated himself just due to the fact that he's returned it, not returned it, he's repaid it, as opposed to listen, if he's guilty, then that's definitely a higher level. If he's not guilty, then it's kind of I understand what you're saying. It's a very good answer you gave me, that you're putting Hashem above people, but that's the one that mystifies me in a way.
All right, so there's two aspects to that. It's a good question. Firstly, if he's guilty, according to the opinion that he only has to pay the principal back, he might as well wait for witnesses to come against him, because he's got nothing to lose. If he's lost anyway, he only loses if he's caught. That's point number one. So there's an upside to doing it now if he is guilty. If he, according to the guilt, if he's off the hook with the custodian's oath, then in this world it doesn't pay him to return it, because if he's a thief and he's got no conscience, he's off the hook. And if he's innocent, it pays him to do it now for a different reason. Is that, number one, he feels bad. Say, Gavin, you trusted me with something, you didn't pay me, I was a mate of yours, I was meant to look after it, and I lost your phone. I lost it. And you said, look after it, and I'd feel bad and I'd want to replace it for you. Now, why would you think I stole it?
Well, I wouldn't take, but if my financial position was solid, I wouldn't take the money from you.
No, the point of it is, why would you think if you felt I was that conscientious that you gave it to me in the first place, I never asked money for the service, and if it went wrong, I could have got myself off the hook by just taking an oath and say, listen, it was stolen from me, which is a completely plausible argument. It's plausible because I actually, by law, if something's stolen from me and I'm meant to look after for you, if it's stolen out of my hands or they break in the car, it's not my fault. I could use that. I went beyond the law to make sure you got restitution. I didn't have to. So why would you think I'm guilty when I'm only on a losing streak financially here?
I didn't think you're on a losing streak. I wouldn't take the money from you. So
no, but what I'm saying is your initial assumption was one of guilt. And if some, do you get what I'm saying? So the truth of it is,
well, I was looking at more in the old days. As soon as we did our example, then it doesn't look like guilt because we made so.
Okay, so let's say you had a service provider come in your house and the TV went missing, and you said, "I'm going to sue you if you don't return the TV," and he was scared that it might be a whole court case and everything else. Okay, let's take your example. Let's not take us as an example, friends. You're right. There's biases there. And we use that as an example. The first thing, if he says to you, look, at the end of the day, I don't want an unhappy client. I don't think one of my guys that worked for me that was doing transport and moving took it. But here's the money for the TV or whatever. You might feel he's one of his guys did lay it, but you would definitely use his service again, since he didn't have to pay you and he did. number one. And
Yeah,
number two,
absolutely.
number
That's
two, he could get off the hook because you need evidence to say that he stole it. You need to prove he stole it. The onus is on the person extracting the money to prove there was a crime. You can't just go around accusing people of taking things. You need evidence. Now, if a person today in a courtroom swears on the Bible, their testimony is accepted when they go in the witness box, unless contradicting information comes to light. That's number one. Number two, so there are two cases here. Person wanted to do the right thing by somebody that entrusted him with an object, even though he was unpaid for the service. He didn't have to do that. Number two, he didn't want in Bava Kamma to even use Hashem's name in vain. The case in Bava Kamma was more complicated off. The case in Bava Kamma is exactly as Gavin said. He wanted to clear his name, Arthur. So what he did is he actually took an oath because he knew Gavin didn't believe him. And he said, I'm taking a testimony using Hashem's name on a Torah scroll saying I didn't take it. I've cleared my name, right? Fine. Now that I've cleared my name, here's the money because I don't have to pay you legally. Now you think, wow, initially you look at it saying, what a guy. He was prepared to swear on Hashem's name. That's very heavy duty stuff. It doesn't get heavier than that. And he did over and above and he paid the money to Gavin. Now you think this guy's on a level. He's a super tzaddik because not only if he's cleared his name, because he's prepared to face Hashem and do it with a clean conscience, but he's even prepared to do something he doesn't have to do now that he's legally off the hook, perhaps, and pay Gavin. So one thinks immediately when you look at that, that's a higher level, but it's a lower level because he aggravated the court. He made sure this poor owner of the item had to take him all the way to court. 2 or 3 court dates postponed. Eventually, he took the oath, and his name was more important to him than Hashem's name. Clearing his name was more important than using Hashem's name. So this is where the issue is in Bava Kamma. What happens if he swore using Hashem's name and then afterwards paid? Is if they find the thief afterwards, the custodian entitled to that double payment, even though he paid the principal, is the original owner entitled to the deposit. That's where it gets complicated. Do you get what I'm saying? This is the case in Bava Kamma. Now, let's go on, because we haven't covered much ground, Gav.
Yeah, sorry.
No problem. So, there are 2 opinions stated. Surprise, surprise. I don't think we've ever done a Gemara where there's 1 opinion stated, but okay. So 2 opinions. Abaya said it is paid to the owner of the deposit. But Rava said it is paid to the one who had the deposit in his possession, the custodian. So the Gemara gives the reasons for their respective opinions. Listen carefully. Abaya said that the penalty is paid to the owner of the deposit, for since the custodian troubled the owner with an oath, the owner does not convey to him the rights of the kefil payment, okay? In other words, Abaya maintains that the owner conveys to the custodian his rights to the kefil in gratitude for his payment for the principal, only when the custodian pays it immediately. In a case where he aggravates the owner, where the owner has to sue him in court, and even takes the oath to exempt himself to show what an innocent guy is and uses Hashem's name in vain, the owner doesn't convey to him the rights to the kefil, despite his subsequent magnanimous payment for the deposit. It's according to Rashi. Okay? Now, Rava doesn't feel the same way. What does Rava say? Rava says that it is paid to the one who had the deposit in the possession, meaning the custodian, because since he ultimately paid for the deposit, the owner conveyed to him the rights to the kefil payment. So according to Rava, that he maintains that even though the depositor did not receive payment without a lot of trouble, he nevertheless is thankful to the custodian for reimbursing him for the loss of deposit. Why? Because legally he could have gotten off the hook completely by just taking the oath. And therefore he returns the favor by conveying to him the rights to the possible kefil payment if ever they found the thief. You see their respective opinion, guys? So you can understand both points of view. Now, let's continue. The Gemara cites the Tanaic teaching on which both opinions are based, and they disagree with regard to the inference that can be drawn from the Mishnah in Bava Kamma 33b. Because we learned in the Mishnah that if one deposits with another an animal or utensils for safekeeping as an unpaid custodian, and they were stolen or lost, and the custodian paid the value of the goods to the owner and did not desire to swear and thereby free himself from liability, for the sages said in the case of theft or loss, the unpaid custodian may swear and he thereby discharges his obligation to the owner, but nevertheless this custodian chose to pay rather than swear. Then if the thief is subsequently apprehended, he pays the twofold payment if it's an utensil, or if the thief slaughtered or sold the animal, he pays a fourfold or fivefold payment. To whom does he pay? To the one who had the deposit in his possession. For the owner, in gratitude for the custodian's reimbursement of his loss, conveys to him the rights to any future payment that might be received on account of the deposit, both the careful payment and the fourfold or fivefold payment, because at that stage, the custodian could have got the off the hook, and there was no thief found. Okay? Okay, now, this is the important part. Abaye infers his position from the Mishnah's first segment. Okay? Now, Rava infers his position from the Mishnah's latter segment. So when you see how they read it, it's very, very clever. Okay. So the first segment states, if the custodian paid and did not desire to swear, and thereby exempt himself, the thief pays the kefil to the custodian. So this implies that the reason the custodian is granted the kefil payment is that he did not desire to swear, and in fact paid the owner for the deposit without ever exempting himself through the oath. Okay? But if he himself did swear to exempt himself, then even if he subsequently paid to the owner the deposit, when the thief is apprehended, to whom does he pay the twofold penalty? To the owner of the deposit. Okay? So Rava, on the other hand, infers his position from the Mishnah's latter segment. What does the latter segment state? If, however, the custodian swore and did not desire to pay, the thief pays the kefil to the owner. Why? Because if you look at the reason why we grant kefil to the owner is that the custodian did not desire to pay at all. In fact, he never paid. But if he did pay the value of the deposit to the owner, even though he initially swore and exempted himself as was off the hook, but he extended himself financially, when the thief, if he's ever apprehended, the kefil goes to the one who had his deposit in his possession, for the simple reason that there's a heck of a lot of gratitude that is owing to the custodian for extending himself, because he didn't have to, even though he put the guy through a bit of trouble with the court. Maybe just wanted to clear his name. Okay, so we've got 4 minutes, we're nearly done. So according to Abaye, the latter segment of the Mishnah is difficult. So because Rava said that the owner receives the kefil payment only if the custodian did not pay at all. So how does Abaye deal with it? So Abaye will tell you that the latter segment is meaning to teach that if the custodian swore and did not desire to pay before he swore, but only after he swore, then when the thief is apprehended, he pays to the owner of the deposit. Why? Because he's not such a tzaddik. He didn't care if he used Hashem's name. He was only interested in clearing his name. He put the owner through such aggravation, it doesn't get conferred upon him. That's a right that's reserved for somebody that doesn't create those sort of problems. Now, Rav is a lot more lenient because he says something different. But we say, well, how does he deal with the Abaye's first segment of the Mishnah's interpretation? Because Abaye implies that the custodian receives the kefil only if he did not desire at all to make an oath. So Rava would tell you, listen, the first segment means to teach that if the custodian paid and did not wish to stand by his oath, but rather paid, in other words, he was off the hook. He could have stood by his oath and not had to pay anything. But it doesn't matter. As long as he paid, when the thief is apprehended, that benefit gets conferred to him because it was he himself that was off the hook financially by the court and extended himself to the original owner. So if the thief is ever apprehended, there's no question that the custodian deserves to be reimbursed, even they put the owner through a bit of aggravation for financially going above and beyond the call of duty. And maybe not everybody's on the Haasma Drager. Maybe, as Gavin said, he wanted to be believed. He wanted to clear his name. Maybe it was also important to him. But he didn't have to pay, Gavin. And Rav is much more lenient than a buyer in this case. We're done. I hope this share was clear. Lovely to see you guys. Mosai Shabbos. May Hashem bless you with a healthy week.
Damon, I can't see how much time is left on this.
2 minutes. You want to talk to us? When do you want to
Can
do
you?
it?
Yeah, so yeah, I had an issue on the train. That's why I went off video. Can you just describe, as I was on the train,